Hello fellow stick wielders, Scott from Amperage Drums here. And in the last video, I gave you the introduction of why you would want to take sounds from the VSTs and put them directly on the module, showing you how good it sounds, and that's the sound output you get when you hook up your module directly to any PA or amp or whatever, even your headphones. So now in today's video, we're going to go over the first part of how to actually do this, and that is how to extract the raw wave sounds from your VSTs. The very first step is to get the SDSE audio tool to grab all the sounds from the VSTs. So to do that, go to your browser, type in www.lustark.com/SDSE. And then that takes you to the Simple Drum Sound Exporter page. And this is the tool that you'll need. And while the free download it's good for a trial, you do need to buy it. So just do the purchase and follow the instructions when he sends you the code. The next and last piece of software you're going to need to extract the wave sounds is the VST host multi-track software, which is called Reaper. So to get that, type in Reaper, REAPER.fm, and that will take you to Reaper's download page. With Reaper and SDSE both installed, you can now launch Reaper and then launch SDSE. I'm going to be using Windows, of course, but Mac will be pretty similar. So first, we can launch the Reaper program, and we can just launch that into a blank project. That's all we need to do. Now we can launch SDSE. So type that in and launch this program. You will in Windows get this because it's not he didn't sign this app, but it's fine. So you just click yes, and then SDSE will load. And when it loads, it should auto configure Reaper for you. Oh, you have to click. So once you click Reaper, you can see that SDSE will configure Reaper in the way it needs to pull from the plugins. And you can see over here, it loads all the possible plugins that it supports, which we'll talk about those first, but I will also show you that this can pull sounds from non-supported plugins. Before we get to exporting the sounds, let's go over the options for the SDSE program. So clicking options will bring them up. And while it does say all default or recommended, I've actually found some changes to be very beneficial in terms of the playability of the samples I create. So I don't remember maybe 100% of everything I changed, so we'll go screen by screen. That way you can look and compare with yours. But I do not believe I changed anything on this first page besides just making sure this module said the strike, which I don't really think does anything. And on render, this is one thing I changed, is remove duplicates is not exact by default. I think it's remove duplicates is set to all, and I found that to be too aggressive, so I changed it to exact. I also want convert to 16-bit. I don't know if that's default or not, but you definitely want that. And then this one is critical. In my opinion, you want a mono mix. And the reason for that is while the Alesis Strike Pro does support stereo samples, in fact, a lot of their default sounds are stereo, you don't really gain much benefit from storing a stereo sample, specifically for like toms and something where you're going to just pan them anyways. So it's better to actually just store those in mono and then in the module pan them, and it saves a lot of space. It makes your drum kits a lot smaller in size. So I would do a mono mix generally, and if you want to rerun and just grab like your snare, something that you're always going to have centered anyways, in case they've recorded it with some ambience, you can record that in stereo. But I recommend mono here for everything. With the render settings set, we can now go to convert. Now note, this whole video, I'm assuming you're an Alesis Strike Pro user, but actually the convert with functionality would be for the 2-box. So if you're watching my video for that, I think most of this video will be applicable, but you won't be doing render, you'll be doing this, and I'm not 100% sure what you want to do here. For zones, I'll leave this here for a second. I believe I did not change anything on this page, but double check what I have here with yours and you can make any changes to match mine. The next setting is the samples, and there's two tabs for these. And on the first tab, this is the amount of samples to grab. And here I did make a lot of changes, and it's going to be hard for me to remember exactly. So just look at this, look at what yours is, and make sure this match. And after you do that, the other thing to change is this one. I think they put check samples was the default, but by far the one I found the most useful is minimize gaps. Because if you don't select minimize gaps, you might get like a bunch of samples right next to each other, like at velocity 127, 126, 125, and then there could be a big jump before your next group of samples. And generally, that could be actually what you end up using, but if it's not, to me, I feel it's a pain to go back and get more. I prefer to have this setting, and you get spread out samples throughout the entire velocity range of the MIDI. And on the second samples page, I actually don't believe I changed anything here, but go ahead and double check these settings to see. Now it's time to start grabbing the actual sounds. We will start with a supported plugin, which is one that the program has mapped already. SDSE is already mapped like where all the parts are, so it's pretty easy to grab the samples. And then after that, we'll try a non-supported one, which I'll be using the UGRI Tone Tight Studio. So for this, the supported one, we're going to be using this Moto Drum plugin. So we load the studio kit. It's actually already loaded. And then we can go, of course, to customize. And this is where you can, change your cymbals. So for this program, I believe since this is the trial version, there's not even a single choice. So pretty much everything, every kit piece that's already selected is what you get. So with the plugin open, all the kit pieces are loaded. We can now pretty much just go right up here to SDSE and click the render button. And that will take control of the screen, do some funky stuff, and then it'll start grabbing sounds. Now this process does take a little bit because it has to actually grab all the sounds automatically. It actually is a live process, like you can see right here. It actually starts rendering the sounds. So it's more than real time, but it's still a little bit slow. So you do have to wait this out. This is going to take a while. I'm just going to stop the video here and restart the video once the process here is completed. And now that all the files have been rendered and SDSE is completed, we can exit out of SDSE and go to our file system. So here I have my samples folder, and I'm going to be sticking these samples in the Moto Drums folder. This is just, I've created this. And then over here on the right file system, it's blank right now, but we want to go to where SDSE put the sounds. And it actually always puts the sounds in desktop SDSE Sounds. So we can go to that. I believe on Mac, it'll basically be the same thing, but double check that. And so with that, we have all of these sounds that were extracted, and we can copy them over. So here's the studio kit, and I've actually already copied these sounds. And how I copy the sounds is I use the same naming here as the Elisa Strike, which is China's and splashes. I'll go in here, so I could copy anything that's a splash into here. And then crashes, I'll go into here, so I'll copy the two crashes, etc., etc. So we can copy these all over here. Again, I've already done it, but that is what you would do. And then your whatever drive samples library would contain those samples. Another neat feature using SDSE is you can actually grab just individual sounds at a time. While Moto Drum, I actually haven't found a way where you can turn off samples. Like there's no right click to turn it off or anything. But let's go to the Stephen Slate 5 sample kit. And so here, let's say like if we only wanted to grab the snare drum, if we actually right click, we can remove all these other instruments. And after we remove them all, we will run the SDSE program, and it will auto detect that the only thing loaded is the snare, and it will only grab the snare. So let's see that in action. So if I just click render now, and I will cut the video here to right till when it's done, and then show you that only the snare was rendered. With that render completed, and you can see it only took 40 seconds, when we go back to the folders, you can see here that for the SSD, it only grabbed the snare and the snare rim because that's all that we had loaded. Another really important thing to note when grabbing the sounds is that whatever you set in the mix or the settings, it will grab exactly that. So if you want to change those settings, you have to re-grab all the sounds. For instance, for SSD5 or any of these ones that support like room mics, I found that for the Alyssa Strike, and at least for my taste, I really like to turn down the overheads and the room mics for everything, and then the overheads for the toms to try to get more of a dry, direct sound for like the toms and the kick, and then use the room mics a little bit more for cymbals and the snare. I find that that gives a better overall sound when you're playing it back, especially on headphones. But just note, like if you grab the whole kit with, these room mics up and stuff, and you want it dry, you have to, bring it down and then re-grab those toms. And what's cool about this is actually you can grab them both, and then you can have like two versions of the kit. You can have like dry, and then you can have more reverb built in. But personally, I like to try to grab the sounds as dry as possible, and then use the Alyssa Strike Pro's like built-in reverbs on top of my kits at the end. Now that I've showed you how to load the supported drum plugins that SDSE auto loads in the Reaper project it creates, I want to show you that you can actually use SDSE to grab sounds from pretty much any drum plugin that's out there. So one of my favorite drum plugins right now, at least in terms of using for extracting the sounds on the Alyssa Strike, one of my favorites is the UGR iTone. Yeah, this one. So basically, if you go to ugritone.com, this is the full URL, but just go to ugritone.com and then collect their products and drum. And Total Studio is good. I have this as well, but definitely my favorite right now is this Tight Studio. If we can find it right here, and you can see this is on sale for $10 right now. So if they're going out of business or something, there was a right here, this farewell. They're going out of business. So grab this while you can, because this Tight Studio, it's a really clean, dry kit that works super well when you extract the sounds. So yeah, we're going to go over right now using SDSE to grab this one. Any of these UGR tone plugins would be the same. And in fact, this works for also handy drums I've done, among a couple other of the non-supported plugins, like a Best Service Artist Drums, which is a really old plugin I bought years ago. I don't recommend it, but I had it from years ago. So without further ado, let's get at it. So the first thing we've got to do is actually load in the unsupported plugin into the Reaper project. So here in this Docker window where they've auto-loaded all these supported ones, you can simply just right-click, do Add Effects, and over here it'll pop up this window, and you can select any that you have installed. So I want to use this UGR iTone Drums plugin. So UGR iTone, like, they have one plugin and all the packages get loaded into it. I'll show you that right now. And for this, we want to load in, it's loading right now, so just give that a second. Okay, so now that completed loading, and we can select our toms. And right now, actually, I've already done this, so of course the Tight Studio is selected, but you could also use any of the Total Studio ones. But with these drums selected, it's ready to render, but there's one more step to do, and it's because this one is non-supported, the program doesn't know what drum belongs where, so we're going to have to go tell it the mapping, and that's the trickiest part. I'll show you right now. So the secret to setting up the mappings is up in Reaper in the main program, not the Docker, way up here in the file. You want to go to region render matrix. And this is going to be all the MIDI possible like regions that you can make a sound. And so you've clicked this region manager button, and then it's better format in my opinion. And this is where now we can select which things we want to render. But this is where it's a little bit of trial and error for an unsupported plugin. That's why a supported plugin, the author of SDSE, has gone through and selected which one is which. Because while, you know, these actually say snare, tom, and all this stuff, what I found is this in reality, these aren't necessarily that or anything at all, in fact. So for UGRI tone, for instance, the kick one is actually the kick. So if we put this to the master, so you right click it and you do master mix, or you don't right click, regular click, I'm sorry, and you click master mix. So you see the word master there, that means it's ready to render. And so now if I click this render button in SDSE, it'll actually grab this kick drum. And make sure you only select the first one. See, there's like 3. I don't know why, honestly, but just always select only the first one. Anything but the first one is wrong. So I know for UGRI tone, if we click the kick works correctly. In fact, I'll select that, and I'll select like one tom, because the tom 0 is nothing, but there's 5 toms in this program, and tom 1 through 5 are the toms. So you can grab tom 1 like that, tom 2, right? I'll just grab these 2. And right now, if I click this render button, it will give me those 2 instruments. So let me do that and show you that that works. All right, and you can see it's just finished rendering up, and now it's, you know, copying all the WAV files into the right folders. And that is done. So again, if we go to the file system, you can see there's the kick and there's the tom, and if you extract them, they are actually legit waves. If you picked a zone that actually is nothing, when you go to this, there'll be only like one wave file or none. And if it's one wave file and you play it, it's just like empty or, you know, weird sound or something. So now that we've rendered the named files, you know, tom1, tom2, those things that are named correctly and actually give you valid sounds, how do you get the rest of the sounds? For instance, in UGRI tone, I can tell you all of the hi-hats. I think maybe the foot is right, but basically all of the hi-hat stuff is wrong. If you say like render me the hi-hat, it doesn't render anything. So how do you get at that? Well, at that point, what you need to do is we need to, in this program, find the actual MIDI mapping for that instrument, and then we can select those exact MIDI notes. So here in the UGRI tone, I don't remember if it's routing. No, MIDI. Yeah, that makes sense. It's called MIDI. Okay. And so you can see here, this is the actual MIDI notes of all the instruments that this sound outputs. And so you can see there's a hi-hat closed, a hi-hat pedal, hi-hat semi-open, and a hi-hat fully open or wide open, they call it. And those are at 42, 44, 46, and 32. So if we want to grab those sounds, what we need to do, I don't know how to close this. I forgot how to close this. Maybe just click it again down here. Yeah. So now that we know those 42, 44, 46, and 32, what we do is go back up to Reaper, that secret setting, the region matrix, render matrix, go to this view. Okay, so we're done with the kick, so we can deselect it. We're done with the tom. What we want to do is, past all these named ones, all of a sudden you'll see all this MIDI jazz, right? This is the MIDI notes. So remember we said that 42 was, I don't remember which one was which now, but I remember 42 is 1, 44 was 1, and 46 was 1, and I think 32 was 1. And again, always select the first of these 3 that are the same name. I don't know why there's 3. Now that we selected that, we can close this matrix. Click, if you're back in this project, you can click FX. That brings back up this. Go back to, UGRI tone. And let's go back, double check that. It was, 42, 44, 46, and 32. So now that we've actually selected all of that, now if we click render, it will render us those exact MIDI notes, which are going to be the hi-hats in this case, because that's what we looked up and selected. So that's the secret to rendering sound files, both the named ones that actually happen to be right and also the ones that are just kind of not right, but the output from the program tells you how to grab them. And now that that completed, again, we can go back to our folder. And here I didn't delete the tom and the kick, so they're still there. But now you can see these weird ones that are just named MIDI. And if we go into them like 32, these are all the notes, and this should be the foot pedal. And it is. So with that, I have now taught you how to grab sounds from both supported and unsupported plugins. That will conclude this video. In the next part, we're going to go over how to use Goldwave Online's free version to modify the sounds, to trim them down and prepare them to then be turned into Elisa Strike instrument files. So stay tuned for that video.